Welcome back to the Marine Corps Theater. Today we're excited to have Colonel Marty Bedell to be your speaker this morning's session. I'm not going to read his bio. You can click the link on the app or go to the website, but I just will highlight just a couple of things because I want you to understand the caliber of individual that we have to speak about installation resilience today. Marty has got a couple of degrees in English and sociology, but it's from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. And not only is he educated and well-educated, his spouse, Rebecca, who's sitting right up here in the front row, is a PhD social scientist. Okay, so you imagine, put those two together, there's a lot of intellectual capital in there. But Marty didn't really start out in the military. He was fighting forest fires first, and did that for a couple years, and then went off and became a Marine and pilot trained, and also part of the world famous Black Sheep. And if you don't know about them, I ask you to take a Google of that history of that organization. So without further ado, we've got Colonel Bedell, Marty here to talk to you about installation resilience. Marty?
Thank you very much. All right, good morning, everybody. How's it going? Great to be here. I appreciate Mike revealing all of my good ideas. They're coming from the front row. I do have the unfair advantage of having a think tank at home, so processing during the day and then coming home and trying to figure it all out. I want to thank AFCEA. I want to thank the industry partners. I definitely want to thank the reporters who are keeping us honest, asking hard questions, and trying to get the word out. So I think sort of Admiral Boyle said that you should start off something like this with a polarizing statement. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple polarizing statements. First of all, I think as we're thinking about installations and installations resilience, the distinction and separation we make between the operating forces and the supporting establishment creates some problems and some potential frictions and potential disconnects. So the words we're using and how we're orienting ourselves within the military as an operating force and a supporting establishment, there's something there to be considered. The second thing that I'd like to think about and talk about today, again looking at installations and installations resilience, is that we have a flawed model for sustaining our facilities and our infrastructure. And that flawed model is under-resourced to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, specifically in sustainment. And we can talk about the specifics of that and how that kind of comes out in the installation side and how that affects the operating forces. So thinking through that, let's examine that, thinking about a system of systems and also teams, the part of the organization that actually does all of the work that is required to run the system. So yesterday I heard one of our admirals talking about mobile airfields and thinking about our aircraft carriers as mobile airfields. And that's very helpful to think about them that way. I think it's also, and this is a kind of a review of a point I made last year that I want to build on. So if we have mobile airfields as the way we're looking at our aircraft carriers, then I think it is also useful to think about our bases and our stations as stationary carriers. So you're thinking about the airfield considerations and how do I take off and land aircraft as the thing that is happening on an aircraft carrier. when you're looking at your bases and stations as an aircraft carrier, you're kind of assuming the takeoff and landing part because there's a runway there. I got that. But what else is similar to an aircraft carrier that helps us think through what are the requirements that we need to be able to have that capability for that operating platform? And they are not particularly surprising. We need to have power. We need to have water. We need to have food. We need to have security for that carrier, for that installation. And then we need to not forget the carrier part, the facilities and the infrastructure and the pipes and the cables. So the coherence that comes with thinking about our bases and stations as a carrier, I think is very helpful. We now have kind of a checklist of things that we need to be resilient. And when we say resilient, I think we're talking about redundancy. We're talking about the ability to have a backup plan if your primary system is degraded. So that's kind of exciting. I am the captain of the USS Miramar, and I have an embarked air wing. So whatever the air wing needs in order to be able to take off and land aircraft, that is my job. I provide that. So then thinking about the system of systems, this carrier, the USS Miramar, now I can start thinking about things like berthing and chow halls and gyms and the security on the gate. How do I protect the carrier, and how do I provide for the team that is running the carrier and that is operating off of the carrier, the embarked units? That has been a journey. That has been exciting to see what has happened when we start thinking of ourselves as part of the air wing, the carrier strike group, the air wing and the carrier. So that has been really interesting. Admiral Rosen, who is responsible for all of the Navy installations in the region, and General Woodworth, MCI West CG, both talk about air power. Well, General Woodworth talks more about air power beginning at the hangar. Admiral Rosen talks about sea power beginning at the pier. So again, thinking about a system of systems, we start with the aircraft. We start with the F-35, about $100 million a copy. Takes off. It has exquisite capabilities, the unfair advantage that we want. But then we need to account for all of the other parts of that F-35, of that helicopter, of that tilt rotor, the runways, the taxiways, the hangars, the base operations. But then we need to go one step further. Are the barracks part of the F-35 capability? Absolutely. The chow halls, the behavioral health offices, all of those things are required in order for that aircraft to take off and for that aircraft to come back and land. So now we have a checklist, and now we can start to assess each of these parts of the system, and we can start to analyze the health of that system and the components of that system. And we're not there yet, but referencing the model, referencing the resourcing of that model, we can start to connect things like the condition of the barracks with the operational capability of the air wing. That is exciting. And I'll give a shout out to a number of partners. So let's think about that system. So we've got the aircraft carrier, we've got the crew, we've got the military folks. All right, that all makes sense to me. But in a larger understanding of the team that is supporting that system, now we're talking about our industry partners. Now we're talking about our partners in academia. We are grappling with very, very difficult problems. We are trying to figure out solutions. And we have a lot of tech. yes, there are technologies that can be applied against parts of the system. Definitely need that. But there's also a lot of work that can be done in terms of organizational design, in terms of understanding how do we need our team to be structured, who is assigned against what role within that team, within the crew of the USS Miramar. What I didn't know before I took over, there are a lot of civilians that are required to make our ship function. We have about 350, almost 400 civilians as part of the air station staff, another 500 with Marine Corps Community Services who provide support to the Marines and sailors. So now we're starting to think about the team and what they need. How are we bringing them on? How are we recruiting? How are we getting after their training? How are we retaining them? So the environment has changed. The workforce has changed, both civilian pool as well as the pool of people we are recruiting into the Marine Corps. And it is really, really smart money and time that we are investing in trying to better understand how do we optimize bringing folks on, properly training them, and supporting them while they're on board. I think there's something about validating assumptions, being very, very aware of your assumptions, and thinking about what you take for granted. Quick sidebar, the hiring timeline for civilian employees right now has gone from about 80 days last year, and that was considered pretty good, industry standard. We're now somewhere between 150 and 180 days to bring civilian GS employees on. Do you think that there is an operational impact to that timeline and the caliber of individual that we are able to attract and retain? There absolutely is. That is a huge impact. So how are we accounting for getting the right people on board, and then how are we supporting them once we do get them on board? I have an absolutely incredible team, and I see a number of them here. Thank you all for being here. So another consideration when we think about our installations as a carrier and what the installations are providing for the operating force is our training ranges, all of the modernization efforts, all of the addition of new weapon systems require training ranges. Everything that we are shooting flies higher, farther, faster. So as we're thinking about not just where we're operating from, but what we are doing once we take off, that's extremely important. I'd like to talk a little bit about the academic partnerships that we have, and there's a lot of green fields and a lot of opportunity there in connecting with academia and trying to get as many smart people as possible connected to the team that is looking at how do we modernize, how do we improve, how do we optimize. We're connected with UCSD and the Innovating for National Security program that they have, which has borne some fruit, having student groups with a faculty advisor come aboard the installation and connect with the operational commanders, the lieutenant colonels and the colonels who are doing it every day and who are wrestling with barriers and head herders. We had a really successful team come aboard and look at our firefighters. The Miramar has a fire department, 54 firefighters who are part of the security of the base, and they wrestled with something that seemed very simple, which was how do our firefighters and our engines see San Diego Fire Department's engines, and how do we have San Diego Fire Department see our engines? So there's a common operating picture. And they came back with a very simple solution. For about $3,000 and an iPad and getting on San Diego Fire Department's account, we are now connected to them and their ability to see us and our ability to see them. So our mutual aid support of each other has been improved. And that came out of 4 undergrads talking to our fire department, talking to San Diego, wrestling with it for about 10 weeks, and that was a very satisfying thing to do. $3,000, I can do that. That sounds, I thought it was going to be 3 million. So that was an example of a success story for the Innovating for National Security. In terms of human performance, we're thinking a lot about how do we account for the individual. We've done a pilot with the Naval Health Research Center looking at fatigue management among the pilots that fly for Air Station. So again, this was something that was something they'd been wrestling with. They've been looking at ships and crews and fatigue on ships. So I raised my hand and said, we'd love to be a part of that for our pilots. A well-rested pilot is an extremely important part of the equation for safe aviation operations. So we've got pilots running around with Oura rings and monitoring how much sleep they're getting and actually changing behavior over time, accounting for when you are fatigued, cumulative fatigue, things that we know contribute to mishaps. That's extremely exciting. I also am very proud, and again, we're talking about teams, and how does an Air Station team connect and have a much larger sense of what the team is. Miramar partnered with RAF Leeming in the UK, a very like-minded commander over there, Gareth Prendergast, one of the most English names ever, was over here, and we started talking, and he shared that he had started a community garden aboard his installation. Okay, that isn't the first thing that comes to mind when I think about war fighting, but tell me more. And in establishing this community garden, he was bringing together in a very healthy way the people that lived aboard his installation. So there was a social connection that was being made between junior enlisted and families that lived on base and retirees. And what he said was very surprising was not only that sense of community and the connection to food cycles and healthy eating and all of the things that we should be thinking about. He said that there was mental health benefits that he could point to that he hadn't really thought about, including a very touching story of a special operations airman who was working through some PTSD issues and asked if he could be the beekeeper. It's like, yes, you can be the beekeeper. So over the space of months, there was healing that was occurring through this community garden that was on his air station. So we're going after that at Miramar and trying to duplicate that effort, and also potentially connecting it to what are the requirements of the carrier. Well, we talked about power, and I can talk about microgrid as much as you would like, having energy redundancy, but what are our sources of food? If the Cisco trucks stop rolling up, how many MREs do we have, and what is our plan for feeding the 12,000 Marines and sailors and families on the base? So I don't think a community garden is going to solve all of our food problem in that circumstance, but it is at least beginning the conversation to be thinking about where does our food come from, how are we going to get it, how do we support ourselves, how do we reduce our logistics footprint. The other thing I think is very important to consider when we're thinking about the teaming, we talked about industry. Our industry partners, Schneider Electric, Johnson Controls, these are passionate people that care very much about the capability that they are fielding. They are present every day and operating these systems, seeking feedback, looking to improve and support, trying to answer demand signal. So that part of the team is really, really important for the station to continue to operate. I think I'd also like to mention that we have relationships with our community and our community leaders. So housing, childcare, all of these things that you don't think about when you're seeing the F-35 fly, they are very much advocating for the support DoD writ large needs to be able to address some of these barriers to having Marines and sailors able to be at work focused and ready to go. So I'd like to end, before I take some questions or comments, by meeting up the system and the facilities with the people and giving an example of where those two things really come together. Where is this seam? Sergeant Major Ruiz, the new Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, is on a tear. And he is doing amazing work getting the word out. And I'll give you the quote from him. The barracks are a manifestation of what we value and prioritize. So let's think about the barracks as a placeholder for any facility on base. And it is a good that is pretty good representation for any facility. And this gets to the model we are using to sustain our facilities. So are we taking for granted the condition of our facilities? Are we taking for granted our barracks? Yes. We have underinvested in our facilities writ large, and it has come home to roost. Across DoD, and not just in the Marine Corps, our barracks are in a sorry state of repair. So thinking about that, we began a journey at Miramar about 2 years ago to try to focus our efforts to examine what is in the realm of the possible if you were to attempt to optimize some part of this facility's system. And we got after it. And it has been a very, very interesting journey looking at a very complex system. You'd think you just build a building, it's good to go, it's brand new, and check Marines into it, new furniture, probably good to go there, and then we're good. No, come to find out that running a barracks complex requires administration of the barracks, which is connected to the maintenance capability for that barracks and the funding associated with that. And then the third piece of that is the command, the station command and the embarked units commands, 05 and 06. The incredibly frustrating position that we put our commanders in is not having clarity on who owns this problem and who is responsible for what. I need the commanders to conduct field day inspections every week, once a week, just like we have done since 1775, where you check and make sure your Marines are living all right, bed's made, shoes aligned, head's been some version of cleaned. We're making sure that the system is running. And you're also checking to see if there's anything that needs to be fixed, because commanders can't fix things. They can fix aircraft, but they aren't in charge of fixing barracks. That's my job. So if you go to a room and it's not good to go, and then you send a demand signal to somewhere and it doesn't get fixed, you have created a value problem for that Marine and for that commander, because we said we'd take care of our Marines when they joined. We're going to work you very hard and we'll take care of you. And that's not happening at the level it should be with regards to how we're housing our Marines and our sailors. So we've got to fix that, because that is a retention decision for many Marines. I love working hard. I love the mission. I'm not okay with where I live. I am going to get out of the Marine Corps. I'm going to get out of the Navy, because there is a values mismatch. There is a say-do gap. You're saying I'm important, but you're not taking care of me. So we have gotten after that at Miramar. Instead of the Marines kind of being at the bottom of a pyramid with people at the top kind of trying to take care of them, we flipped that. The Barracks Support Center that I run and staff is now supporting the 05 commanders and the 06 commanders in executing what they need to be doing for their Marines inside of our collective barracks complex. And that has been a really exciting journey. And part of the DNA for the Barracks 2030 roadmap that the Marine Corps has rolled out, I'm proud to say started at Miramar. So I'll end with Sergeant Major Ruiz and the Commandant and the Assistant Commandant have directed in very Marine Corps fashion, every single barracks room in the Marine Corps will be inspected by March 15th. So as soon as I'm done speaking here, I'm going to go back and help out with the inspections. But the idea that we need to have a baseline starting point for understanding what needs to be fixed and how we prioritize it, that is encouraging. The spotlight is now on how do we fix this? How do we get this right? So I'm really excited that we are delivering for the Marines and sailors in the barracks. And we need short-term wins. We need to show them that we understand their living conditions are part of a larger war-fighting capability, the berthing on the aircraft carrier. So I will end with, I want to make sure everybody's tracking the Miramar Air Show and the associated Innovation and Technology Expo is going to be back in September 27th, 28th, and 29th. If you think this is cool, and it is, add some aircraft flying and a Marine Air Ground Task Force demonstration and all of the innovation and tech that is connected to supporting the installation. From energy storage, communications, drone technology. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. So I would encourage you to please come to the air show and see Miramar. I'd like to share your base, your Marine Corps with you. All right. With that, I would love to take some questions and please ask some hard ones.
Yep. How you doing? First, I really do appreciate your comments. Sir. So, Lucian Niemeyer, so I'm a little bit of a ringer. I'm a former Assistant Secretary of the Navy, EIE, a couple removed. So the question I'm asking has to do with sorry?
Can you pull that up a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you.
The question I have to ask has to do with some recent headlines. So about 2 weeks ago, national security leaders testified that the Chinese have implanted malware in the defense critical infrastructure around our military bases. They called it it's a time bomb. It's sabotage. And the goal is to disrupt your mission from you being able to launch aircraft. So as an installation commander, I have two questions. As you're looking at the range of risks to your mission, what has been the response, and I'm just using you as an example, how are installation commanders responding to the fact that you have, for lack of a better word, Chinese in the wire, and how comfortable are you that you can carry out your mission knowing that this threat is still being vetted on a national level? And then the second question is, how do you characterize that risk versus other resilience risks that you face to be able to, for mission assurance? And ultimately, what are you doing to, for lack of a better word, buy down or burn down that risk? And where does cyber risk rate in that? So really the first one is, how comfortable are you don't have Chinese malware anywhere in near or around your base? And I know you've done a lot of work with Miramar to make yourself energy resilient. You've got backup power, but what about your water? What about your comm? What about other systems on the base that are directly threatened by this malware? So I'll throw it up to you for questions.
Okay. So the cyber risk that all 26 bases and stations are experiencing, we are comfortably or uncomfortably underneath the umbrella that Deputy Commandant for Information is able to provide us, the MCSEN, MCI West G6. So we make sure that we are doing our updates. We are as connected as we can possibly be to all of the institutional protections that are provided for us. But I'm absolutely concerned and thinking about what that cyber attack or impact would look like. I think from my perspective, as I'm thinking about specific considerations, it would be who is coming onto the installation to do what. I am absolutely interested in having as open a system and base as possible in the innovation space, but who is validating the equipment that's being put onto our networks? Who is validating which companies are owned by who? And that has actually led us to look very, very carefully at who is involved in that process. So I rely heavily on NIWC PAC experts connected to that security screening that is going on.
And then as you look at the range risks from resilience risks, what would be your top priority right now that you're really focusing on reducing that risk immediately? I mean, there's a range of risks that can affect your mission.
I think the range of risks, the two that are on the top of my mind are energy security. If we do not have power, we do not have the ability to operate. And that is in support of the local community in the event of a natural disaster or a mobilization where we would need to be supporting the MAW and the MEF getting out of town. So energy, we have to have it, and if we don't have it, we are dead in the water. The second thing that is very concerning is the UAS, unmanned aerial systems. We have a very good ability to detect. We are working very hard as a DoD to address how do we defeat via electronic warfare or otherwise. So those are the two things that are keeping me up at night.
Hey, Trainwreck, great presentation. Dixon Smith, prior Navy.
Admiral.
The Secretary asked my question, so, hey, Rebecca, how are you? So I won't ask that. So talk a little bit about your view on the importance of community relations and the efforts that are important, because to be honest with you, most towns, cities don't like noise, don't like the encumbrance and the encroachment. So talk to you, how do you mitigate, and you're working on mitigating encroachment and your relationship in the community a little bit?
So my understanding of what the base is has changed, and the base is not just inside of the fence line. 90% of the people who are in 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing and part of the station crew live in the local community. So any impact to not just the base, but the local community is going to affect our ability to operate. My predecessor, Colonel Dockery, Chim Chim is here, and he shared with me during our pass down the amount of time spent engaged with the local community is surprising, and it has been. So going to community groups, engaging with local elected leaders, making sure that I understand what is going on outside of the wire, noise, how are we doing everything we possibly can to mitigate the noise impact to the local community? What are their concerns? Scripps Ranch, which is just outside of Miramar, experienced a horrible wildland fire a number of years ago, lost a number of homes. That is very much on their minds. So what can I do in terms of supporting the local community that supports the base? We have established a wildland fire crew made up of Marines and firefighters from Miramar that are able to deploy on our installation if needed. So being aware of the concerns, the complaints, the problems that the local community has, and anything I can do to address them, that's definitely in the billet description.
Thanks, Trainwreck.
Sir.
Hey, Colonel John Klein, Johnson Controls.
John.
Your discussion was really good about the barracks and the say-do gap. What can industry do to help? Because I don't feel like we're doing enough, and there's more that we could do, and are interested in what your thoughts are. How can we help?
Thank you very much. A member of the team, Johnson Controls, so thank you for being here. So the Marine Corps is trying to come up with what right looks like. What is the plan for the barracks in particular? And a lot of the things that we are wrestling with are not particularly sexy. How do we administer the barracks? What systems are we using to check people in and out of rooms? Do we have tablets to be able to do room inspections? Is there a connection between maintenance, service requests, and the people who are needing to do that maintenance? things that the hotel industry has kind of figured out long ago. But those basic administration tasks are things that we are currently wrestling with because we are using clipboards and Excel spreadsheets. So how do we get to a slightly more modern approach to doing some time-consuming and important things? I am thinking a lot about security, and I appreciate your work in looking at that. We have cameras all over the flight line. We don't have cameras in our barracks. That seems odd to me. I would like to be able to have the Marines and sailors that live in the barracks be in a safe, secure environment where we are able to know what's going on and to be able to address any concerns we have because we have visibility. So something as simple as adding security cameras in the barracks, you're like, yeah, why haven't we done that already? I agree. But all of these things cost money. So how do we rack and stack, which gets to the flawed model for sustainment? If all of these things are important and do need to be addressed, and we have parts of this that simply aren't accounted for, that is a problem. So I think if I could ask for assistance, it would be in anything related to security of the installation and anything related to the administration and management of the actual buildings. How much energy am I using by building? Do I have the ability to adjust energy usage, particularly with the HVAC systems specific to buildings? Do we understand how we are using our energy and when? And the last thing, thanks for priming the pump on that, electric vehicles are coming. They are actually already here. And so our ability to charge electric vehicles, both government vehicles as well as personal vehicles on base, there's some exciting work being done on that front as well. But we need to catch up quickly to that, having electric vehicle infrastructure on our installations. All right. It's got to be one more fastball out there. All right.
Good morning, sir. Just wanted to just have a comment more than a question. I just want to thank you for your vision and your sight with the barracks issue. It seems that it's a big problem around the Marine Corps. And day one, once you hit Miramar, you took that head on. And now the Marine Corps is looking at Miramar as a model installation on the way we should be treating our Marines. And just want to thank you for your vision and your forethought, sir.
I appreciate that. You just earned the $100 I gave you for making that comment. So I will note that it is very, very important to understand with 26 bases and stations all over the country, there are differences in the starting point for some of these head herders. I do not envy my boss at Camp Pendleton. I am trying to make sure that HVAC systems are functioning, and he is trying to figure out how to install HVAC systems. Their barracks don't have air conditioning. So these are hugely expensive infrastructure programs that need to be funded. So trying to get to the basics, hot and cold water, toilets that flush, heat in the winter, air conditioning in the summer. All right, that's a pretty good starting point. I'm trying to get a 2-star Airbnb for the Marines. They'll be happy. They're not living at home, hot and cold water, heat and cold air, and a toilet that flushes. And we're going to have no complaints. So the ability to deliver that is going to cost billions of dollars. And it is going to take time to go from the inventory we have for barracks across the Marine Corps to the inventory that we need. The thing I am trying to keep in the conversation is that thought experiment. What if we had all of the barracks we need? They're all brand new right now. What then? How do we maintain that system? That's the part that we could wind up focusing on the fact that we don't have what we need, and it's going to be a few years before we get there. Well, let's do both things at the same time. Let's get the facilities and the infrastructure we need as quickly as possible, but let's also account for the missing parts of the system in terms of administration and maintenance. Let's deliver as much as we can on that as quickly as we can, because that's actually easier to deliver with the inventory we have now. Ma'am.
Hey, sir. Gidja Fuentes, writing for Naval Institute News. Kind of with that in mind, with these barracks inspections that are going on, what will come of that? Like, what's the next step? Because I can imagine a long list of things, problems, minor, but also some major ones. Who makes the decision? Who's going to prioritize? And how much discretion do you have as an installation commander in light of what will likely be a significant issue to overcome across the Marine Corps? I mean, the Marine Corps invested a lot of money 20 years ago on the barracks, but they're 20 years older, right? So those things add up. So where do you go from here? And in light of the budget situation and the competition for dollars, how do you make the argument that this is really important as getting extra parts for that F-35?
Thank you for that, and I'll be very aware that I'm going to speak about Miramar, and I will also give some visibility to the Commandant's effort on this. So what happens after you do detailed inspections? So the desire is to have the most bang for the buck if we are going to add resources against the barracks. The ACMAC and the Commandant, General Smith, has said, I'm going to put $2 billion against this problem a year over the next 5 years. So how do we spend $10 billion in a way that is going to have the most impact as quickly as possible for the Marines and the sailors that are in these barracks? So that is the beginning of that roadmap. What do we need to focus on? I have a little bit of a sneak peek because we did this about 18 months ago. I started by asking all the Marines what they wanted. I got a whole bunch of grumpy Marines in a room and said in civvies, I'm here to help. I want to know what we need to focus on. And HVAC, hot water, and responsiveness of maintenance. Those were the three. If something is broken, we need to have some confidence that it is being tracked towards some sort of fix. That's reasonable. And they said, if it's going to be a week, it's going to be a month, it's going to be a year, okay, just, we put in their work request. Is somebody working it? It's going to be fixed in 3 months. Okay, great, I'll deal with that. I got it. That was the piece that we needed to add into. The other thing that happened related to all of the inspections that are going on right now is the number of maintenance requests spiked. And that was very encouraging because that meant that the Marines were listening. Said, if something is broken, we need maintenance requests so we can fix it. Because people were just, things weren't getting fixed, so they weren't even putting in maintenance requests. So we didn't even know what we were trying to accomplish, what needed to be accomplished, which meant we needed to expand our maintenance contract to include more work. I saw that wasn't going to get us there other than fixing the things that were broken because many of the rooms needed to be fully refurbished. That was not part of the scope of the maintenance contract. So with our NAVFAC partners, we have added a 13-person barracks project team that is going to be an additional maintenance capability. So if a room absolutely is not going to be habitable without some sort of deep refurbishment, tearing out 25-year-old carpets, redoing the walls, just the basic things that you need to do, but we don't have the ability to do that. We needed the ability to do that. So I believe that the Barracks 2030 roadmap has identified that exact requirement. We need to be able to fix these rooms. We need to be able to get them up to a higher level of standard, and then we need to keep them there. Expanding maintenance contracted support, adding barracks project teams that are able to do more refurbishment, and the end state being a minimum habitability standard for each room, that if the room does not meet that minimum habitability standard, we're taking it offline and we're not going to put a marine in there. It is not habitable. Kind of simple, but kind of hard. Thank you for the question.
Hi, I'm Elle Hancock with the Naval Postgraduate School. I was wondering if you could speak more on how you're preparing for adapting to and thinking about climate threats and extreme weather events.
Say that last part again.
How you're preparing for and adapting to climate events, like climate threats and extreme weather events as they increase in the near future.
Okay, thank you. Shout out to Naval Postgraduate School. About 15 months ago, we partnered with the Naval Postgraduate School to do a workforce analysis of our structure and to try to figure out if we have the right people and enough of them to be able to accomplish our assigned task. So that is another example of having a teammate, the pros from Dover, coming in and helping us understand if we have all of the people on our TO, is that going to do it for us? So sidebar on the workforce analysis. Thinking about climate change and thinking about what we need to be doing at each installation to be part of the solution. For us, it is thinking about our green energy and the net zero calculation that we're trying to be a part of. Across DoD, there are energy goals. We have the advantage of having a landfill on board the installation, and we are reclaiming methane and turning that into electricity through a third-party partner. That gets us to about a 50% net zero. So we are not solving the climate crisis, but we are trying to go from 50 to 65% net zero by adding more reclaimed methane produced electricity. So thinking about that, we're also thinking a lot about how do we divert as much as possible towards recycling as opposed to going into the landfill, which has a shelf life of probably another 8 or 10 years. So it can be overwhelming to think, how do I solve the climate crisis? The Marine Corps is trying to give useful guidance to the installations to be doing as much as possible in these small areas that collectively contribute to progress. So electric vehicle charging stations, net zero energy production, more solar, battery storage, energy efficiency in terms of things that we're buying and constructing. So that's how we're trying to get after it.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Hoorah.
Hey, Colonel, great brief. Enjoyed it. I think you said that 90% of the crew of the USS Miramar comes in from outside the gate every day.
Yes.
How comfortable are you with balancing the OPSEC concerns that brings and still making a reasonable commute that allows people to, in the Southern Cal environment, to leave home to get to work at a reasonable hour? And are there technological pieces you're incorporating into that process? Thanks.
So if I understand the question, it is the workforce that needs to commute to the base, and how is that as a variable? Coming through the gate. So there's some exciting developments in terms of facial recognition technology, the ability to have people coming and going through the gate more efficiently. So we need to make sure we have a secure installation. We need to know who is coming on and off the installation. And there are definitely some exciting technological solutions to knowing who is coming on and off the base. Related to that is a previous point I made, that the people who live out in town, their ability to get to the base and go back home, or as importantly, come to the base and perform their mission, but how are their families doing out in town? If we have some sort of widespread power outage or interruption of services, there's going to need to be consideration for how's everybody doing in the larger community, because that's where our families are living. So we're definitely thinking through who has to be at work and who can work remotely do we have power and connectivity to potentially be able to work more remotely? We have explored that, obviously, during the pandemic. But security on base is extremely important, and making sure we know who's coming aboard and not having the people we don't want come aboard. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you all very much for your time and your installations, your 26 bases and stations, your operating platforms. I do want to share that we have some incredibly talented people, both military and civilian, who are part of the crew for those platforms. We don't have a shortfall in talent, and I see many of my crew here today, so thank you all very much for being here.
Colonel Bedell, on behalf of
You're welcome.
AFCIA, thank you.
Thank you, sir.